happened at the NCO coming in, the rookies coming in. We had ARI. Dr. Joyce Shields was the head of that part of ARI at the time. And she devised a 1-week piece of instruction that was both a practical exam and a tutorial about why it would be a good idea for you to come and being in the recruiting force, even though you'd been ordered to go into it. We had to make a sale as to why it would be good for you to go do that. We will give you some skills that you don't have, because it was terrifying to come into the recruiting force. I mean, we just thrown 500 people out of it. It was all in the Army Times about purging all this stuff, and people began to say, gee whiz, it's a hard place to come and work, and we'll liable to get fired and thrown out, and that'll ruin our records and all that. So you had to then appeal to these people that you brought in as newbies to get into it. So we began to change the recruiting force, put them through this school that we ran at Indianapolis, and try to give more people an opportunity to become recruiters. Made them follow their people all the way through graduation at advanced individual training. Had to keep a roster on how well their people were graduating. So that became a major thing for the non-commissioned officers. For the officers, I wouldn't take anybody to be a district commander at the time, which was a captain's billet. I'm sorry, an area, which was a captain's billet. It was like being a company commander. Unless he had been a company commander of whatever branch he was in. So we substantially improved the quality of people in the area. And most of them would tell you it's a lot easier being a company commander. Line unit, being a company commander for 3 months. And then at the officer level, we said we wanted 50% former battalion commanders in whatever branch they were. And the Army, again, Vesey said, do it. So that's simple.
Did these two stick?
You bet. Then we wanted half the people in the brigade command slots to have been brigade commanders, and that stuck. So from that standpoint, we got very good officers and very good NCOs coming along. Got rid of the 500 people that had been alleged to have conducted recruiting malpractice.
Did most of them stay in the Army, or most of them booted?
Most stayed in the Army. They're reassigned elsewhere. Administrative action. But they were out of the recruiting business. And where there were flagrant cheating and scandal, then they get court-martial. Article 15, court-martial. So that sort of took the...
It was a house cleaning, I guess.
No, it was, we didn't go out and say we'd dump 10,000 recruiters and get 10,000 new ones. I mean,
No,
you
just got the ones who were better.
We replaced people and we started moving people out. And we said, you've been in the recruiting business for 4, 5, 6 years, it's time for you to move on. What happens in productivity? I mean, we had individual productivity curves on every single recruiter. You find out after about 3 years in it, the productivity begins to decline, except for some very exceptional people. They get tired of it. I mean, it is a negative industry.
It's a tough industry.
Well, when you have to make 35 telephone calls to get 8 people to agree to talk to you further, to get 5 people to take the physical exam, to get 3 people to take the mental exam, to get 1 guy to join the service, I mean, you're in a negative industry. And people get tired of that. Some people thrive on it. A lot of people get tired of it. So we began to rotate people back in the force. And we had more people wearing recruiting badges because they'd served in that, like drill sergeants, and it began to pay off for us back then.
Is that something you wear for life, the recruiting badge after you?
Yeah. So one is the character of the force, and one is the recruiting game. A third attack vector became the business of taking the mystery and potential deceit out of telling you what your job is going to be. Promising people one thing, but delivering another.
This is what the recruiter says to the prospect, or what the boss says to the recruiter?
What the recruiter says to the prospect.
Demystification.
So what we did was we embarked on an enterprise that said we will put into every recruiting station and every guidance counselor station a TV tape of every one of the MOSs. So, for example, you would bring up, guy says, I want to be in the infantry, and you say, well, let me show you what you're going to be doing in the infantry. You punch up a 3-minute segment, and the TRADOC would be responsible for producing that 3-minute segment and keeping it current. We also put in a very leading edge automatic data processing system, computer system. The system was designed by a guy named Steve, and I'll think of his last name here. The civilian that worked for me. It was designed to take your scores, Steve Donovan. It was designed to take your scores on your ASVAB, your high school scores, and your personal desires, beat them up into a machine, and give you back 25 top options for you to join.
25 for each person?
And it came up on the screen 5 at a time. So let's say you said, I won't join unless I can be in the infantry. Okay, so infantry came up number 1 for you. But you had to have the requisite skills to get in the infantry. You have to have the requisite physical characteristics to get in there. So all these would be put together and mashed in this thing, and it would show infantry and say, yeah, Thurman is capable of doing that. He's also capable in the artillery, the armor, mechanic, linguist, whatever else he was good for. And then you look at that and say, well, let me see that infantry tape. And the tape would come up, and you said, geez, I don't want to get in that. And you go down the next tape, be in the artillery, next tape be mechanized, or next tape be linguist, and you work your way through until it makes sale on that particular guy. Now, this very sophisticated computer system was a reservation system. It would be like an airline reservation system, but instead of saying you're a male or female and you're going from Boston to Los Angeles on flight number X and seat number Y, this tells you your height, your weight, your mental acumen, how much schooling you've got, etc. I mean, a very sophisticated reservation system. The reservation system continuously analyzed how many seats were to be sold in the infantry, armor, artillery, etc., versus how many had been sold. And we're always working for the needs of the Army, and therefore the 25 reservations were then skewed to meet the needs of the service based upon seasonality of sales. Very sophisticated.
So
Yes.
that means a recruiter could punch this thing in and say whether the guy could be a medic or
Yeah,
whether
but
he could have his first choice.
But the guy, he could publish medic in, but medic may come up number 25
Yeah.
because the needs of the service say we need armor guys more than we need medics. Or mechanics or cooks or whatever else it is. So we present cooks earlier than medics, even though he's qualified for medics. very sophisticated, very good at doing that. Now, when we first started out, I found out one of the key guys in the business was the guidance counselor. He had a lot of control. Now, the guidance counselor can't control his computer system. He can only control the input. We control at Headshed, we control the computer system by inventorying what in the computer is being sold already for the next year ahead. But when I first got there, we didn't have this very sophisticated computer system. We were short combat arms guys. And my view was, if you don't have combat arms guys, you haven't got an army. So I told the guidance counselors, every fourth guy has to go into combat arms. And guidance counselors say, Roger, and suddenly we were filled up into combat arms. So you see, part of this drill was finding out how to issue instructions to the various segments of this very sophisticated organization in order to make things happen. Okay? Now, the first year that I got there, I had 172,000 mission on my back. Because we missed, the previous year, we missed by 17,000. We missed essentially a division's worth of troops. And most all of them were in the combat arms.
10% shortfall, yeah.
Yeah. So the next year, we cured these combat arms. And I figured if we cured the combat arms, people would feel better because units in the United States would start getting filled up with combat arms people. So there's a psychological operation going on.
Yeah, you're changing the product. At the same time, you're changing the picture.
Well, people in units would begin to feel better. Suddenly, infantrymen are coming through the door instead of saying we ain't got any infantrymen.
Yeah.
See, the blame was being laid on the recruiting command, didn't recruit the infantrymen.
Right.
And I said, no, we're going to recruit infantry because the Army is infantry. That's what the Army is, and everything else is secondary, so we're going to fill every single infantry point. So we began to do all that. The problem, though, in the first year that I was there is we had a mal-normed ASVAB. And so we took in a large number of people who were mental category 4s and even some high 5s, so we didn't know we were taking in. We thought they were 3Bs. And so the first year in my stewardship was lackluster in terms of the quality that we wanted. But we began to set the stage for what was the quality we wanted, which was we said we wanted to get 63% in the upper half, and we wanted 90% high school diploma graduates, and we wanted not more than 20% mental category 4. And that year we didn't do that. When the tests got straightened out, we had to go back and renorm it. We had 25% were upper half, 50% were mental category 4, and 50% were non-high school graduates. So the only thing we made on round 1, year 1, was called Thurman, is we made volume. Now, in recruiting practice, we made a major shift from going after recruits in the, what I call the contract, in the accession mode, to going after them in the contract mode. Up until the time I got there, accessions were the mainframe, and so every Monday you looked at how many people you shipped in the Army. And after about 3 months of that, I began to say, no, we're going to change to contract. And everybody told me I'd break the system. The system couldn't handle it.
Contract means a certain number of this kind.
Well, contract means, I tell you, if you're a recruiter, you got to bring in 3 contracts this month. You don't worry about when they go in the Army. I'll figure out when they go in the Army.
Oh, okay.
You just bring me 3 people for the Army. But you see, if I tell you, I want you to bring me in 3 for next week.
Right. It's a different story.
then you gotta go get 3 guys who are willing to come in next weekend, then you're looking for the dregs, you're bottom fishing then. So by going to a contract, I could also put people back in the high schools, because I wanted to get people in the high school market. I went to one recruiting station in Newburgh, New York, not a station, but a battalion. And there's a guy named Fitzgerald up there. And I said to Fitzgerald, how many high school diploma grads you bring in last month? He said, 0. He said, don't you know what we do in Newburgh? I said, no. He said, well, we have Bedford, Stuyvesant, and the Bronx, and what we do is we go down and if there's a shortfall in recruiting mission, we make it up. We don't go into any high schools. We don't know where the high schools are. So I said to him, okay, Fitz, you got the same mission you had before, except you're all high school graduates. You may not put in a non-high school graduate until I tell you you can. Which I thought he was going to have heart failure right on the spot.
Sure he did. I'm surprised he didn't.
So he failed his mission for the next couple of months because they had to go find out where high school graduates were.
Totally reshaped their
Yeah.
program.
So we also began what I call the adjudication process. And we instituted a thing called the Rule of 50. There was 1 of me, there were 5 brigade commanders, 57 battalion commanders, and 2,500 company commanders. So if you think about that a minute, me versus the 57 battalion commanders, that's 1 in 50. And then 5
Brigade commanders.
brigade commanders. I said there were 2,500
Probably 250.
company commanders. There were 2,500 recruiting stations, 250 company commanders. So then there were 5 brigade commanders on 250, so that's 1 in 50. And then there were 57 battalion commanders on 2,500 recruiting stations, that's 1 in 50. So we had the rule of 50. And I would give the mission to the 50 battalion commanders while the 5 brigade commanders were around. They were sitting there while I was doing it. They could hear the mission go on. So there's no distortion about what I told the battalion commanders to do. And then the brigade commander had to go give the mission down to the captains. And so there's no distortion about what the brigade commander. So I was reinforcing the mission process all the way down. And we called it the adjudication session. And I made some great friends with lieutenant colonels in those things. There's a guy named Zaldo in Sacramento, California. There's a guy named Newell in Santa Ana, California. Jerry Blackwell was in Kansas City. There's a group of these guys that enjoyed the repartee, the 2 Fitzgeralds. There was one Fitzgerald in Newburgh and another one in New Jersey. And they enjoyed the repartee of arguing with the general.
Was this adjudication and the negotiation of
Yeah,
what,
it was,
what the mission would
a
be?
negotiation session.
I see.
In other words, I gave them a trial mission. What they would do is they would come in and they would tell me how they were doing. We do this on their turf. In other words, we go to Charlotte, North Carolina and do it, or go to San Antonio, Texas, or go to San Francisco, or wherever the hell we were doing it by regions.
You and the brigade colonel would go see the battalion commander.
That's right. And they would bring along their sergeant major, and they would tell us how things were going in their particular domain. And then I would say, okay, now I'm going to give you 250 mental category 1 to 3A high school diploma grads, and 50 non-high school grads, and 75 women, and go through this drill. And then they'd say, oh, we can't do that. Not possible. So what does it take for you to do that? Well, we need another $25,000 worth of advertising, local advertising. I'd say, okay, you got it.
Okay.
Or the guy would say, I can't get 75 women in this. The market won't stand 75 women here in this area. I'd say, okay, 60 women, and then you bring me 40 more mental category 1 to 3A males. Whereas you give up 15 females, and I'll make you take not 15 males, but 30 males. For 40. Well, that became a sporting venture, and we did this every quarter, looking at a rolling year ahead. And so then this was a year ahead in every quarter. Every quarter updated the year ahead. So you kept a rolling goaling system and a rolling goaling performance system by doing that. And then the brigade commanders had to go down and see the captains, and then the colonels had to go down and see, lieutenant colonels had to go down and see the sergeants on the stations. And then we instituted, in furtherance of all this, we instituted a thing called the mission box, and you carried that around on your person. And it said, Thurman, Sergeant Thurman's got to get 3 high school diploma grad male, 1 high school diploma grad female, and they all got to be mental category 1 to 3A. It can't be any Cat 4s, no 3Bs, no non-high school graduates. And woe be unto you if I found you out there in recruiter land without your mission card. I was up at Long Island one day, I was at Fort Hamilton, and the Long Island recruiting, that was where they had their testing going on. I saw this recruiter standing out front, he's anxiously looking outside, waiting for some prospect to show up to go through the guidance counselor game that day. I said, hey, Sergeant, how you doing? He said, oh, I'm doing fine, sir. I was in civilian clothes, going to Germany. And I said, let me see your mission box. Well, I left it in my shirt, and I sent my shirt to the laundry, and I said, Sergeant, I was desperate now. I said, Sergeant, I'm the desperate of the Army. My name is Thurman. Does that mean anything to you? And so I said, go home and go to the laundry and get your shirt and get the mission box out of it and bring it back here. And if your recruit shows up, I'll be sure to take care of him while you're gone. But I mean, it was sort of a death on you if you didn't carry this mission box around. But this was a management by objective function, you follow me? There's no bullshit as to what it was you're supposed to be doing for the month of, and you got 3 months. You got October, November, December. Then you got January, February, March. And you kept a rolling mission box about what it's doing. Now, if you had 3 high school diploma graduates, and that was it, males, and you brought a female, you didn't get any credit for that until you got the 3 high school diploma graduate males. I mean, we got it very narrowed down to what it was you were supposed to be doing. So the mission box, management by objective, the rule of 50 and the adjudication system and negotiation process, advertising was going on, an extensive automatic data processing system put in to manage all that. Looked at every morning I had a regression analysis, how much sales had been done the day before, whether I was making my trend line or not.
Okay.
Just fed out of the machines. I mean, Walmart couldn't do anything. The giant food company couldn't do anything. The people changeover that we instituted, the acceptance by the Army by what it is we're doing. Those are sort of some highlights of it. Now, I've got a paper I presented at the Second All Volunteer Army thing. I'll give you a copy of that. There are sort of 11 major. The other very significant one, which I should mention, is meanwhile now back in January of 1980, I go to the department and I say, I got to have an educational aggrandizement. By now, it's turning out that education is what people are looking for. It's a major one, so I need to hit. So after much stirring about, we got Dr. Al Martin at OSD to approve a trial. What I found out then is you can do anything in the Army under a trial, if you label it that. So it was a test, and we got the RAND Corporation to do the work on 25% of the country. And we put this test in, and we measured all the recruiting statistics and all that kind of stuff, advertising weight and all that business, and we began to see whether or not an educational aggrandizement did make a dent in trying to bring more high-quality people into the Army, and the answer was sure enough it does. We then got that expanded nationwide by the late fall of 1980, and so by 1981 we had a college. The Army College Fund was now part and parcel of our recruiting arsenal, and it was targeted on 1 to 3A high school diploma grads. That's the way you got it. That leads later into a rejuvenation of the GI Bill, but the early part of it was the Army College Fund, and we had an aggrandizement, and we applied it to combat arms. And so we were able to change substantially the quality in the combat arms. I mean, more arithmetic. We had a lot of really smart kids going into the combat arms because we'd say you can go on a 2-year tour, and we'll give you $9,600 for college when you get out. And it was a big seller in those days. We substantially enriched the combat arms.
Better believe you did. I mean, it was amazing. The kind of guys were privates. They were
well,
serious.
I go back and look at all that in retrospect. And one of the things that Paul Gorman was trying to do in TRADOC when we were down there, he was trying to do self-paced instruction. And we were delivering mental category 4s to him.
Right.
So he was way ahead of his time from the delivery process of what we were bringing in the Army. So it turns out later we could deliver the right guys to him. By that time, the positions had hardened to the point that people didn't want to give up a lockstep kind of basic training.
Well, you were a major general and you had junior people working for you, but I would really like to know what happened with the culture of recruiting command, which had been run since Julius Caesar's time by NCOs, and how did you get the officers to take charge, to have the confidence to take charge, and get the NCOs to accept the direction of...
Every year, at the conclusion of the year in November and December, recruiters have a big, they call it a training session, and it does have some training in it, but it's really it's a victory celebration.
Was this every region or every...
No, every battalion has one. And I went to one in Columbus. The first one I went to was not far from Chicago. It was in Columbus, Ohio. It was in the month of early December. The second one I went to was in San Diego, California, run by this guy named Tom Newell. And I got up to give my speech at the annual awards conference. Now, I'd heard all these guys had come up and gone to Rookie of the Year and the #1 Recruit of the Year and the Reserve Recruit of the Year and the Most Improved Recruit of the Year, and you know, on and on and on and on. And I got up and get ready to give my speech. Been there 2 months. I've been there 6 weeks. And I said, is there anybody in here who knows what a gunner's badge is? And a sergeant, first class, raised his hand. And I said, hey, Sergeant, what is a gunner's badge? And he said, sir, it's a badge that says, that tells me that if you're a field artilleryman, that you know how to gun the howitzer. I said, are you a former artillery sergeant? He said, yes, sir, I am. I said, do you have an expert gunner's badge for your time in the artillery? Yes. What kind of outfit were you in? Well, I don't know. I was in a 155. I said, okay, so tell everybody in here what you had to do to get the gunner's badge. Now, it's in the middle of this banquet. We got wives there and spouses there and all that kind of stuff. Newell doesn't know what the hell's going on. I'm talking to this sergeant. He said, well, you have to disassemble a breech block and reassemble a breech block. He said, you have to do that under a timeline. He said, oh, yes, sir, you have to do it with a stopwatch. He said, you have to be able to lay the piece, put on the deflection, the elevation, and you have to be able to cut fuses in the projectiles. And I said, so it's sort of like you have to know your craft. And the artillery, isn't it? He said, yes, sir, you have to know how to shoot bullets out of the howitzer. I said, what do you suppose a gunner's badge in recruiting would be? This guy looked at me and there had been a couple of drinks that had been had by most everybody there, and he said, you gotta be able to put a man in boots. That's the phrase of putting a guy in the Army.
Right.
You gotta, I mean, so much about the talking about it. You gotta put a guy in boots. That means he actually gets to the,
Starts basic training.
Basic training. I said, effective today, every officer in the recruiting command will have to earn his gunner's badge in the recruiting business 60 days after he joins the recruiting service. That means that every officer will have to put a guy in boots within 60 days. The whole place stood up and cheered. You see, the sergeants knew that the officers didn't know how to recruit.
Well,
They didn't know how to pick up the telephone, they didn't know how to talk to a guy, didn't know how to take him through the guidance counselor game and all that. So what we did is came back in, I put that thing out as an order. And then recruiters started having to do just what sergeants in the artillery do for young lieutenants. They have to coach the young lieutenant in how to gun the howitzer. Because most kids come out of basic school don't know how to gun it that well. They've been around it, but they really don't know how to gun it. It's just like sergeants teaching a young trooper in the infantry how to be an expert infantryman. You have to teach a guy how to be an expert. You know, yeah, he can walk the 25 miles or he can do the compass course, but you got to teach him how to use the compass. So we put that out and we said every officer's got to go to the recruiting school at Indianapolis. And while you're in the recruiting school, you can start making telephone calls because you've got 60 days to put a guy in boots. So we'd have referral lists come up from the commands, and so Captain Schmerdlap would start telephoning the guy to make the sale when he got home, because he's going to be in the school for 2 weeks before he got a chance to get to see this guy. And of course then they got the negative side of it, which is guys hanging up and saying, don't want to talk to you, you know, blow it out your barracks bag. So it took 6 weeks to realize that the officers didn't know how to recruit. Most officers didn't know how to recruit. Now a guy like Al Ono did, because he'd been a captain down there in recruiting, he knew something about it. Most officers lateraled into recruiting at the grade of captain or a major or lieutenant colonel or even colonel. So they really didn't know how to do it. You had to teach them how to do it. It'd be like me having to go in an infantry unit at the grade of captain after being an artillery officer grade of captain. I'd have to go learn the artillery, I'd have to go learn the infantry weapons like mortars and recoilless rifles in my day and BARs and stuff, which I didn't really learn in field artillery at the same level of competency that an infantry officer did. So that's how I won them over. I sort of put that thing to test. Clifford Alexander came out to see me. I've been out in Chicago about 30 days, and he came out there to see me. And they brought his general counsel, Sarah Lister, who's getting ready to be appointed the Assistant Secretary of the Army Manpower and Reserve Affairs in the Clinton administration. And he brought Janet Hill, who's the wife of Calvin Hill, the mother of Grant Hill, the kid that plays basketball for Duke University. And she was his special assistant. And I didn't know it at the time, but Clifford Alexander's father had been at Great Lakes as a Navy person. And then Cliff had come along and gone to Yale and Harvard and become a very prestigious lawyer and a civil rights guy and all that. So he wanted to go back to Great Lakes because his father had been in the service up there. And he came to see what I knew about recruiting. I've been there 30 days. Hotshot guy from the Pentagon, Senator Bashir. This guy's speaking for the draft. He wanted to find out whether I had assumed command of the recruiting commander. So I said I said, I want you to get 5 captains, 5 recruiting sergeants off the street, and 5 recruiting NCO from the station chief level up to, say, the sergeant major level. And I said, I do not want to know the names of anybody. And no general will be permitted to talk to them. You're the only guy that can talk to them. And they can say anything they want to Clifford Alexander. The purpose is for them to tell him about recruiting. And I said the order of march will be the 5 recruiters off the street, then the 5 senior sergeants, and the 5 captains. Here's the only instruction I'll give you. I want them to come from all over the country. They can have 6 months or less in recruiting service, then 6 months to a year, then a year to 18 months, then 18 months to 24, and then over 24.
One of each.
One of each. Same thing for the officers. Senior sergeants all have more than 3 years. So Clifford came in and said, well, how are things going? I said, well, we're finding out about the recruiting. I've only been here 30 days. Trying to get my feet on the ground here, but we'll get going. I said, now, before I gave a little briefing, and I said, now, before I really sit down with you and tell you what I think, I want to introduce you to some recruiters. And I programmed 30 minutes per group. And you ask them questions. Ask them anything you want to ask them.
So you get the 5 of each as one in a kind of a committee then?
5. These 3 people, and they had a couple of aides and acrobats there. So about 5 on Clifford's side, and including the 2 ladies, and then 5 for the recruiters, and then after 30 minutes or whenever you want to flush them, they go away and bring in the next 5. And I said, I've had no interaction with them, none of my officers have had any interaction with them. They said, well, I don't know what you're going to say. I haven't told them to say anything. So whatever it is you ask them, they'll answer. So they did that. It took about 2 hours. They stayed a little longer than they thought. So I walked in there and said, now before you tell me anything, I'm going to tell you what they told you. I said the first group is a little bit unsure because recruiting's difficult out there. And they have a great deal of pressure brought on them because they got to make a mission given to them by their NCOs, which is the second group, who, by the way, don't recruit. And they just issue orders and tell these other guys to go out and bring people in, bring them in by next Monday, because you got to make a mission on Monday night. I said, the captains don't know anything. They don't know what the sergeants are doing. We're telling the young troops what to do. So there's a tremendous amount of pressure between the captain, who doesn't know what the sergeant's doing, and the guy on the street, because the sergeant in the middle is putting all the heat on the guy at the bottom. And Alexander looked at me and he says, how do you know that? And I said, because I've been around and I've talked to people in this command, that's how it works. And I said, the problem is, it's being run by NCOs. I said, what we're going to do here is going to get officers in charge of this command. And I'm the #1 officer in charge of the command. We're going to get the captains, so that you would expect the captain, just like in an infantry unit, or an artillery unit, or an aviation unit, is running the unit. Now, he needs the help of the sergeants, but there's no doubt in anybody's mind who's running the units. I said, is any doubt in your mind who's running the recruiting service at the moment?
He said, absolutely no doubt about it. It's the sergeants, because the captains have got the foggy side. See, I knew by the time they got to the captains, they'd have enough questions to ask, you know, by having probed the others. They'd be able to say, well, what do you think about X, Y, Z? You know, what the hell's going on?
Yeah, it's very difficult for officers who come in with no expertise whatsoever.
Now, as soon as we got the mission box going, as soon as we got the expert gunner's badge going, so everybody knew that they were, what they were doing in recruiting, then the NCOs began to listen to the officers, you follow me? Other than that, I went down to school one day, and I knew a captain in this course. And I said, what'd you learn down there? He said, I learned as soon as the instructor left, there was a sergeant major in there, had been an old recruiting sergeant major. He said, don't listen to what school said, we'll tell you how to do it. So there was no discipline, there wasn't a system invoked in about that. So we got that squared away and separated the officer schooling. I mean, we had the officers going to school with the non-commissioned officers. We separated that because we don't take the advanced course with the non-commissioned officers. We've got a special school for the non-commissioned officers because their duties are different. It's not because they're not quality people, it's because their duties and responsibilities are different. And officers run units, and NCOs do what officers tell them to do, and they advise officers about things in their domain, about it. But in the end game, a company commander is responsible for unit, not the first sergeant. So you have to. That is a sensitive subject, because a lot of people want to say that it's the NCOs that run it. Well, the NCOs don't run it, the officers do. And the British Army, the NCOs run it, but not in our Army. Do we revere, do we respect, do we honor, do we school, do we train, do we give responsibility to our non-commissioned officer? You bet. It's officer run and led. But that was not what was going on.
Yeah, well, somehow the officers had to become competent to run and lead.
That's right, and confidence devolves from competence. So one of my hallmarks is you got to be competent in order to breed confidence. And that's the reason you listen and learn, and then people will respect what it is you ask them to do, because they then figure you know what the hell it is you're talking about. Now, meanwhile, during all this activity, there's a substantial amount of work in Washington with the congressional committees.
Oh my God.
Making sure that they know what we're doing. And so I was called to testify frequently. Met with each one of the big four committees at least once a month, or make sure that they knew what I was doing, whether I was making progress. I need the education funds, need more advertising funds, whatever. So again, Vesey and Yerkes did not impede me going to the Congress. I mean, they knew that I knew what the Congress was all about. I kept them informed about what I was doing, but I had Congress people come out to my headquarters and spend time with me. And took them to the advertising agency, like Kim Wincup, who would later become the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Manpower in the Reagan administration, or the Bush administration.
What's the big four committee?
The Senate Armed Services Committee, the House Armed Services Committee, Senate Appropriations Committee, and House Appropriations Committee. Those are the people that control the DOD funding. So make sure we went on through that. So that's recruiting.
Yeah, that's an amazing story.
Terrific year and a half. Well, year and 8 months.
Yeah,
It was fun. We had a bunch of winners. There's nothing like having a battalion commander and a bunch of recruiters win. I mean, it is. See, there aren't any There aren't any privates in this organization.
Right.
So sergeants work.
Yeah.
So sergeants have to make it happen. So a guy comes into the recruiting service. For a guy to come into the recruiting service as a sergeant, let's say grade E5 or E6, it is like a battalion commander coming to the Pentagon for his first tour.
He didn't have any troops.
Ain't got any troops to order around. The only guy he can order around is himself. And so a recruiter has a lot of sympathy and empathy, and in the meantime, it's a question of how well are you doing? The other thing is it never stops. You get a mission every month, you gotta make it every month. I mean, if you bankroll 10 last month, it doesn't count by next month, you gotta make 3 next month.
You can't stockpile.
No stockpile.
What happens if somebody doesn't make a mission? A recruiter or a captain?
Well, there is a remedial training situation. He's taken off mission, put in a remedial training status, and there's a sergeant located at the battalion headquarters who's responsible for taking him and beginning to go through the drill again. Sometimes the guy stops making his mission because he's been there too long, and he begins to take things for granted, and he forgets how to call up people on the telephone or go down to the local high school and talk to the guidance counselor. And so there's a performance curve on every recruiter. And sometimes the recruiter gets lazy. And sometimes he just loses the